Mick Foley. This was making the rounds on social media today. He said, and I quote, "I'm choosing to appreciate Vince McMahon until I learn more about what may have gone down." Now, as you guys know, Vince McMahon and the docuseries on Vince McMahon's life and career will be airing next Wednesday. I will be glued to my television. Can't wait. Which is said to be a double shovel burial of Vince McMahon. You guys know the lawsuit, sex trafficking, rape, abuse, all that. Janelle Grant, don't need to get into all that. Mick Foley and Rikishi, speaking at Comic-Con Northern Ireland this year, they were asked about the Netflix docuseries on their former boss. Foley says, and I quote, "I genuinely like him. I mean, my relationship was never the same with him after I left WWE and went to TNA for 3 years. To this day, I'm still trying to find an address to write him, just to thank him for taking a chance on me." The fact that Mick Foley doesn't know where Vince McMahon is right now says a lot about what Vince McMahon thinks about Mick Foley. Just saying. I think all of us are a combination of good traits and bad traits, and you hope your good traits outweigh your bad traits. Perhaps it seems that Vince got it backwards there for a little while. I've been there when he's done good things. I've seen him do good things. When I was writing books, I wanted to essentially do something like Chicken Soup for the wrestling fan's soul about some of these heartwarming moments. He was like, I'm a little concerned that would come across as a little self-serving. He was someone who did the right thing for the right reasons a lot of the time. I really feel bad that someone I care about got into something that seems pretty unsavory. I'm going to hold off judgment until I see the docuseries. But I think one thing that's fortunate is whatever he did or did not do, I don't think many of us are allowing that to mess with our memories. He was instrumental in creating some of these memories, so I think I'm choosing to appreciate him until I learn more about what may have gone down, end quote. Now, just to give you guys a little backstory, Mick Foley used to work with Rain. This is what exactly is Rain, Jason? I don't have
Rain,
the yeah.
Rain is the rape, abuse, and incest national network.
Okay. He stopped. He actually worked for Rain, and he stopped by Rain's office several years ago before Christmas. This is a story here that I took from social media. He announced that he and his wife Colette planned to donate to Rain 50% of the advance royalties from his upcoming memoir that year, Countdown to Lockdown. The book includes a chapter about the origins of Mick's friendship with Tori Amos, Rain's original spokesperson. Mick has also begun training at that time to become an online hotline volunteer where he was able to help survivors one by one and lent his fame to the cause by doing media interviews to help raise awareness for the situation to prevent rape. Yeah. So yes, I mean, I got Rikishi's quote here as well, but Jason, how foolish is it of Mick Foley? I get it. We've heard this from John Cena. You know, he was on Howard Stern and said that, you know, Vince McMahon means the world to him and blah, blah, blah. But this is not just an isolated incident here with John Cena. I mean, there's a lot of these old timers. There's a lot of the veterans that used to work for Vince McMahon who just outwardly are afraid to say what really needs to be said, no matter how much good the man did, because he gave them the lifestyle that they lived and the career that they had, and they owe everything to Vince McMahon. And even Rikishi goes on to say basically similar to what Mick Foley did, because, I mean, 75-plus years that family's been working with the McMahon family. You think Rikishi's going to say anything negative about Vince McMahon, knowing that all of his family, his sons, work for WWE? Now, give me a break. But at what point does it stop to look at the evidence? Mick Foley here, look at the evidence and say, we have a lot of the shit that was broken by credible sources about what this man did, the bad that he did. He worked for Rain. He lent his fame to open up to these people and give them an outlet to just be. He was an outlet for people to express themselves in these dire moments. And now with his comments here, how insensitive are these fucking comments by Mick Foley, man? A lot of people on social media completely just demoralize Mick Foley, turn their cheek to Mick Foley today. I don't know how you feel about this, but to me, it's a sad state of affairs to see this happen, and I don't really understand why people are so afraid to actually speak up about the vileness that Vince McMahon did. No matter how important he is to pro wrestling, his vile nature and who he is as a human being is not going to be told in this docuseries, and it's unfair for Mick Foley to say, I'm going to wait for the docuseries that is clearly going to be doctored to paint him in a great light, but also talk about the bad as well. That's fucking ridiculous to me.
So I think that it's laughable if your excuse is, well, I'm going to wait and see what this documentary series says about the man on Netflix. Like, I've never heard anything, about Vince before ever to, even raise any eyebrows here. But apparently this Netflix thing is coming out. So I guess I'll watch the television show and that will tell me all that I need to know. As if we don't have, documented history of Vince being accused of rape, even back in the 80s. And then, of course, other incidents, the tanning salon incident, and just a whole bunch of other fucking creepy things about this man. But you mentioned Rain, and I think that's the thing that really stuck out to people, because he was a very vocal advocate and volunteer for that organization. You mentioned his book, many years ago, and some of the earnings from his book that he donated. He also, donated proceeds. He was doing stand-up comedy shows there for a while, and he was donating the proceeds from that to Rain. He logged something like 500 hours on their national hotline of counseling people, who had been victims of sexual abuse in some form or fashion. At one point, he offered to mow people's lawns if they donated $5,000 or more to the organization. So, like, he was a major advocate for a group, and of all the things, too. And that's why people are kind of, like, struck by his comments here, because... And we've seen this with other people. You mentioned John Cena, and Kevin Nash was another one. And now here, Rikishi and Foley, where they talk about how, well, I choose to really just remember all the good times and just think about all the good memories that I have, right? And nobody is saying that you can't think back to the good times and appreciate the good memories that you had with this person or you had of their work. It's like people who talk about Chris Benoit, for example. If you want to go back and watch Chris Benoit matches, that doesn't make you a bad person. That's fine. If you want to go back and watch Vince McMahon's greatest promos and greatest segments as Mr. McMahon, that's fine. Because I've had people ask me that, like, well, you talk about Vince McMahon all the time. Are you just not going to listen to his commentary? You're not going to watch his matches anymore, right? You're not going to watch his segments. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. What are you talking about? Like, no, that's fine. That's a separate issue altogether. What we're talking about here is someone who is accused, right? This is still going to play itself out. But I mean, the things that are in that lawsuit, and this all stemmed coming out of the Wall Street Journal articles about the non-disclosure agreements and the secret relationships, and then boom, this lawsuit drops. And remember, John Laurinaitis' lawyer came out and it seemingly like corroborated a lot of the stuff that was in there and didn't just outright refute it. We'll see what sticks and what doesn't. But do I believe that Vince McMahon is guilty of a lot of the sick shit that was cited in that lawsuit? Yes, I do. And if there was even somebody who might have done that stuff, right? The last thing I would want to do is go, I've been fishing around for the man's address because I want to write a letter to him to let him know about all, how much I appreciate everything that he wants to be this man's fucking pen pal. And just the way that he's talking about, what was the quote? He said, apparently it makes me sad that somebody that I like or care about was, involved in something unsavory.
Yeah, I feel really bad that someone I care about got into something that seems pretty unsavory.
Yeah, like he's the fucking victim here or something. Like, oh man, I feel sorry for him. There's the shit that he got involved in here.
The shit that he willingly took on someone else? Yeah, sure thing, Mick.
There's that. Well, there's that too. So, reserving final judgment until the civil case, or if there's criminal who knows, right? Because remember, he's being investigated by the feds, and they raided his home. Like, this is a story that still has yet to fully play itself out. We just heard yesterday that fucking P. Diddy was taken in and apparently charged with sex trafficking, and we're talking about the same stuff with Vince McMahon. And so who knows? Maybe they'll bring him into custody one of these days. We don't know how it's going to play out yet, but it's just very tone deaf. And I find this consistency with a lot of these guys. And I think a lot of it has to do, and I'm sure part of it is just like in their mind, like they maybe haven't fully processed, because it's just horrendous. Like, when you really think about it, it's horrendous.
That's got to
what
be
we're
it. That's
talking
got to be it. Really, yeah.
but it's that, and also the fact that many of them were younger. This is in their younger days when they had that relationship with Vince and they worked for Vince. And I think they looked to him like a father figure and a mentor and somebody who they always thought his approval, like a father, right? They would probably come back from their matches and they wanted to, what did Vince think? Did you like it? Remember that one WrestleMania documentary, Kevin Owens, WrestleMania 33, and Owens wrestled Jericho.
Yeah.
And Owens goes backstage. He goes right up to Vince at the gorilla position to see what he thought of the match. And Vince was like,
yeah,
he didn't like the match. And Owens after that was like moping around. He was so dejected because all he wanted was like Vince's approval. And I think a lot of that is what we're seeing here with these guys who they are grateful to Vince McMahon for giving them an opportunity. They are grateful to him for changing their lives. And they made a lot of money and made their family a lot of money and probably bought their first houses and all that stuff. And they're willing to overlook certain things because of this love that they have for this man, because they do look to him as somebody who in many ways was like a father figure. I do think when you come out, and I understand that, but I think that when you're making these public comments, the way that they come out and make these comments, both of them, Rikishi and Foley, where they almost make it sound like Vince is the victim here. And I don't want to think about that. I want to think about the good times. And I want to write him a letter. And I want to tell him how much I love him and how much I appreciate him. Like, it's sick. It really is. It's sick.
Well, it's also sad too, because it almost feels like they're brainwashed. Like,
it's a cult. No, it's a cult. It really is.
Like they're nothing. They're nothing without Vince McMahon. It's like you're nothing without Vince. You can't be a good human being without Vince McMahon. You can't realize the wrong without Vince McMahon. Like, what the fuck are we doing here, bro?
But it's not even that. It's just like this notion, like, oh man, I can't imagine, because I always saw Vince do some good things, and I just can't imagine that this is the man that I knew, as if Vince McMahon was some kind of like holy figure for all these years. Like, this shit was always bubbling up underneath the surface. We just didn't realize how deep this shit really went and how bad this stuff really was. But like, all the responses, Randy Orton had one of probably the better responses of any of the wrestlers that have come out and spoken on this. And Seth Rollins did too. I think Seth Rollins said it's disgusting. Bret Hart had the best response of everybody, which was, and Bret is another one, to his credit, who has talked about Vince being like a father figure to him, despite all the shit that they went through, despite Montreal and all of it, and blaming him for his brother's death and everything. He has talked about how Vince was like a father figure to him. But when he heard about all this stuff, Bret was one of the first people to come out and say, this is fucking disgusting. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with this guy. I hope he rots in hell. Like, he's just a weird, sick fuck, basically, is what he said. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that sounds about right as far as the proper response. Or if you just don't want to say anything and you want to let things play out, that's fine too. But when they're fawning over him and they're like, talking about him as if he's the victim in all this, it's just fucking sick. And for someone like Mick Foley to make these kind of comments, given who he is and given the things he's been involved in before and the causes that he has fought for and fought to get attention for, and you're talking about Vince McMahon in this way, you just come off like a fucking hypocrite. And so, yeah, a lot of people are going to be very disappointed in those comments. I think it's understandable. It was very disappointing to hear him say that.
Yeah,
nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with waiting. You want to wait to fully form your thoughts until you see how things play out in
the court of law.
In the court of law, I understand that, but still, some of these comments, it's just really, really sad to see them. I don't know if they think he's still pulling the strings or he's going to come back at some point, and they're trying to make sure they stay in his good graces. Whatever it is, I think it has more to do with what I just talked about, though, and how always seeking his approval was always about Vince, right? And they can't wrap their head around this whole situation that this person they thought they knew and they had all this respect for turned out to be one of the biggest, just most vile, disgusting pieces of shit, on the earth. And so it's sad. It really is. It's sad more than anything else.
Yeah, Mick Foley was the last person I would expect to hear that take from. But you mentioned Bret Hart and how he has said that Vince was a father figure to him, but he was never afraid to really shy away from letting his feelings known about basically anybody.
Yeah,
So the moral of the story is be a Bret and not a Mick Foley. That's pretty much what we got to go off here. So
basically, yeah. I mean, that's pretty accurate.
So yeah, that was the latest in the Vince McMahon news bin. Next, what was it? The 25th? What was that, Wednesday? Docuseries.
Well, it's the same. Yes, the same day as Grand Slam.
Yeah. So the docuseries will be premiering on Netflix, guys. So if you guys want to sit with us, we'll be watching along with you. So I can't wait to see what happens there.